We begin today the Gemara on Daf Chafei Amud Beis, the second to last line, Amar Rab Ami. So the Gemara before brought a halacha regarding the Kabbalah of the dam of a carbon, when you receive the blood. So it's after the shechita. You would think that at this point, there's no necessity for the animal to be a tam. In other words, not a balmum. But the Gemara before brought, Rab Zayda said that if you slit the ear of the par, of the cow, after the shechita, then the Kabbalah of the dam will be possible. Okay, so the Gemara here brings a statement that will then be a question on this halacha of Rab Zayda. So the Gemara, Amar Rab Ami, Amar Rab Elazar. Rab Ami says in the name of Rab Elazar, he bifnim, if the animal is all inside the azara, but v'ragleo b'chutz, but its feet is sticking out outside of the azara, the carbon has to be shechted inside the azara, at least inside the azara if it's kachim kalim. Now, in such a case, chotach, if he cut off its feet, v'achkach shochat, and then he shechted the animal, sheira, it'll be kosher. Okay, so now what's the point the Gemara is saying here? The blood circulation of the animal, of the entire body, is all connected. So if the feet are outside, and then when you shech the animal, the blood comes out from its throat, there's also drawing from the throat from the blood that's in the feet. So it comes out that the blood that you're receiving, mixed into it is blood from the feet that are outside of the azara. So therefore this blood is mixed in with puzzle blood. So therefore, Rav Elazar said, if you cut off the feet before you shechted, so now the blood that comes out from the throat of the animal is only from the part of the animal that's inside of the azara, not from the feet that are outside that have been cut off before the shechita. So therefore it'll be kosher. Now the obvious question on this is, but it's a balmum.
Yeah.
You cut off the feet before the shechita. How could this be kosher? Okay, the Gemara will address this. Now, shachad v'achar kachotach. However, if he shechts the animal and afterwards he cuts off the feet, psula, then it'll be puzzle because, as I said, the blood circulates in the entire body, and therefore the blood coming out from the throat is drawing also from the blood from the feet, which are outside the azara. So you have mixed in blood that's from the outside, so it'll be puzzle. Okay, so the Gemara asks on this version that Rabbi Elazar said. You're saying that if he cut off the feet and then he shechted the animal, it'll be kosher. How could this be? Balmum kamakriv. He's being makriv a balmum. The feet are cut off before the shechita. So Elo says the Gemara, we have to amend the statement of Rabbi Elazar and say as follows: he already shechted the animal before he cut off the feet that are sticking outside of the azara. But he cut off the feet after the shechita before he received the blood. Then it'll be kosher. So at this point, it looks like the Gemara is saying, Rashi does not explain, the Mefarshim speak about this, it looks like the Gemara is saying that as long as before the Kabbalah of the blood, there wasn't a connection to the feet that are from outside the azara, that is good. It doesn't have to be cut off from before the shechita in order that the shechita should not have a part of the animal that was outside at the time of the shechita. The shechita is an aveda that's actually kosher even by a non-kayin, even by a zar. So the fact that during the shechita there was a part of the animal that was outside and then the blood that's coming out from the throat includes that, that's not the issue. The issue is if part of the Kabbalah is being done, at least part of the Kabbalah is being done in a time when part of the animal is outside, and then you're receiving blood when part of the animal is outside the azara, that's the problem. So therefore, if he cuts the feet after the shechita, before he receives the blood, it'll be kosher. However, kibel v'achakach chotach, but if he receives the blood, he's in the middle of receiving the blood, and he cuts off the feet then, psula, then it'll be puzzle. Because you have the blood that's coming out of the throat, that part of it is from the blood that was still connected to the feet that was here already after you begin receiving the blood of this animal. This is the way to understand the statement of Rabbi Elazar. Okay, but now the Gemara asks on this based on what we learned before. So you're saying that if after he shechted, now he cut off the feet, and then he received the blood. So now it's kosher because the blood is being received only from blood that's inside, not from outside. But Rab Zera said as quoted before, and if after the shchita you slit the ears or ear of the b'chayr, and then you receive the blood when it's a balmum posel, it'll be posel shanem. The pasuk says v'lokach midam ha-par. The ha-par means par shehoya kvar. At the time of the lokach, which is the Kabbalah receiving the blood, it has to be that same par that's a tongue, complete and whole as it was before. So how can we say here that you can cut off the feet after the shechita and then receive the blood, then it would be kosher? This is the Gemara. Rav Chisda said in the name of Avimi that what is Rabbi Elazar saying? He's cutting off from the flesh of the animal, including the veins, the whole circulation of the blood. He cuts that all off until the bone, but he doesn't cut off the limb completely, only until the bone. So then, in such a case, I say kibel va'acha kachotach, that if he received the blood and afterwards he cut off the foot, then psula, then it will be puzzle. But if he cuts off before, then it's going to be kosher. Why? Because he didn't cut off the foot completely. It's not considered to be a mum through this. That's what Rabbi Elazar was talking about. Now the Mefarshim say, based on this, that now that we see that he didn't really cut off the foot completely, he just cut off until the bone, so you can actually go back to the first version that we had, of what Rabbi Elazar said, that they cut the feet and then they shechted. And it did not become a balmum because they did not they did not cut off the bone as well. Okay, but now the Gemara says we can prove something else from the statement of Rabbi Elazar. Shamet mina, from here we could learn out, dam hamuvla be'evarim, blood when it's still absorbed in the limbs of the animal. Damu, this qualifies as blood, it has the halacha as blood. Because that's what we're saying here, that this blood, which is in the limbs of the animal, the circulation of that blood enters also into the throat of the animal, and then it comes out through the throat, and then it's going to cause that it's mixed in with the part of the animal that was outside, that was puzzle. All right, so if it's mixed in, there's a problem. Okay, so, but if you're going to say that the blood that's in the limbs of the animal is not considered to be part of the blood, it's like water. Only blood, once it comes out of the Evarim, has the halacha of blood. So then this whole discussion about the blood of the feet that were outside could be mixed in with the blood that comes from the throat when you shecht is not a discussion, b'chlal. So from here we see that the blood that's inside the Evarim coming up from the feet into the throat is going to be a problem. Says the Gemara, no, that's not necessarily the pshat here. Dilme, perhaps the reason is mishum shamnunis. This is because of the fats of the limbs of the animal that comes up into the blood and gets mixed into the blood, and therefore that's going to passel this blood because that fat was from a limb of the animal that was outside of the azara when you shechted it. Maybe that's the issue, not the blood itself. Maybe the blood that's in the Evarim is like part of the Aver. It's not, it's like just, so there has a lacha like water. It's not like blood yet. But the Shamnunis, which is a fats, and that comes in through the blood as well, that is the reason that if it was outside at the time of the Shechita or at the time of the Kabbalah, it would be a problem. But the Gemara says, but if that's what you're saying, the pshat is, Shamet Mina, if so, from here we can learn out, Basar Kachim Kalim Sheyotza. Lifnei Zirikas Dam Posel. That the basar meat from the carbon, that's a kachim kalim. Kachim kalim is a carbon that you could actually eat all over in Yerushalayim. But over here, what are we saying? That if the feet of this animal were sticking out before the zrika of the blood, that will invalidate the blood. If it mixes in together with the blood, some of the fats of this flesh mixes in with the blood, it passes. So you see that even though this is meat from kachim kalim, eventually you take it out from the azara, you eat it in the whole city of Yerushalayim. But if you took it out earlier, before the zrika of the dam, and this time here by the shechita or by the kabbalah of the dam, it's going to be puzzle. And Rashi here brings, we see later in the Masechta there's a discussion about this, and there Rabbi Yochanan says that by the basar of kachim kalim, since anyways eventually the place to eat it is outside of the azara in Yerushalayim, even if it goes out from the azara before the zrika of the dam, it will not passel the carbon, because this is kachim kalim that you're able to take out later anyways. So the Gemara says there's no ra'i from here. Dilme bekachim kachim. Perhaps over here, Rab Ami, in the name of Rabbi Lazar, we're speaking only about kachim kachim, which is not going to be taken out eventually. It could only be eaten in the azara. And therefore, over here, if it went out, it's going to passel it. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a Braisa regarding this, related to this halacha, kachim kachim, shchitasam batzofen. The kachim, the place has to be shechted is only on tzafin, as it says in the pasuk, that has to be v'shachat oisal yerach ha-mizbech tzafayna, on the tzafin, on the north of the mizbeach. The kibbul dama b'chli sharetz batzafin. And also the receiving of the blood also has to be on the tzafin of the mizbeach. Now, however, Amad B'Darim, the Kohen himself, he's standing on the Darim, on the south of the Azara. So he's standing there right at the border, but in the south side of the Azara. V'hoishit yodeh. And he sticks his hand in, Litzofin, into the north of the Azara. V'shachat, and he shechts, shchitasik sheira. His shchita will be kosher. The Gemara learns this out later, that says, V'shachat oisai, al yerech ha-mizbeach, that the animal has to be on the north, but not the Kayin himself that is shechting the animal. He does not have to be there on the tzafin. However, Kibbul, if he's standing on the Dorim, and he's makabel the blood from the tzafin, so then Kabbalah Psula. Then the blood that is makabel will be possible. The Gemara will learn this out later, that when it comes to receiving the blood, the Kayin himself also has to stand on the tzafin side. If the Kayin which is standing in Darim side, he enters with his head and with most of his body into tzafin, then it's as if he's standing entirely in the tzafin side. So for the Kabbalah of the dam, that will be enough. This is the halacha always regarding anything in Torah that we always follow. Roiv, if most of his body is in the tzafin, it qualifies. Now, perkis of the animal after the shchita, it shakes and it throws itself around. The animal goes into the darim side of the azara, and then the chazra, and then the animal enters back into the tzafin side of the azara. Ksheira, it'll be kosher. Rashi actually says that the point of a chazra is irrelevant here. Even if it did not return, it would still be kosher. But as we'll see in the next case of this brayse, there the chazra is relevant, so it says it here as well. But over here, this halacha of tzafin is for the shchita and for the kabbalah. But the animal itself, if it ends up in the darim side, it doesn't have to be brought back to the tzafin side. Now, kachim kalem shchitasim b'fnim. Kachim kalem, so that's usually a shlomim and other b'chayr, Pesach. They are kachim kalem, so they have to be shechted anywhere inside the azara. It says lefnei Hashem. That's anywhere in the azara. Now, v'kibul daman b'chli shares b'fnim, and also receiving the blood is in a kli shares anywhere inside the azara. Amad b'chotz, if the kain is standing outside the azara, v'hichnis yodei lefnim, and he stretches his hand inside the azara, v'shachat, and he shechts this way, shchitasik sheira. The shchita will be kosher, because it says, lamed lefnei Hashem, that, the lashon of the pasuk is, v'shachat pesach el mayid, has to be inside the azara, but that halacha refers only to the animal, not to the kain himself. The kain could stand outside. Kibel kabbalah sipsula. However, if the kain that's standing outside and he receives the blood while he's standing outside, then it's going to be puzzle, because receiving the blood is an aveda. Shchita can be done by even a zar, but when it comes to the Kabbalah, that's doing an aveda that can be done only by a kain. There the pasuk says lamed lefnei Hashem l'sharsai, so the kain has to stand inside, otherwise it'll be puzzle. Now, if the kain is standing outside, but he enters with his head and most of his body, over here regarding this halacha, it's as if he hasn't entered. Even though before we said that we follow Raiv, but over here though, Rashi brings is a special pasuk that it's learned out from, that if he enters with most of his body, it will not qualify, because it says in the pasuk, Bevoyam Eloel Mayid, which means until you come completely. Lamed of Nei Hashem, it means you have to be there completely. And over here, Raiv will not be good enough. Now, Perkisa, if the animal that was shechted inside the azara, it was shaking after its shechita, the yotza, and therefore the meat of this animal, not the animal itself, it went out of the azara, l'chutz, and the chazra, and then it was returned, it was brought back inside psula, it'll be pasul. Okay, so over here, you see that once it went out, the basar of this kachim kalim went out of the azara, but if it was brought back in, it'll be pasul. Says the Gemara, here's the point that proves again what the Gemara before brought up. Shma enough from where we could learn basar kachim kalim sheyatza lefnei zrikas damim psulim, that the meat from kachim kalim, Although this is a carbon that later on, where do you eat it? You can eat it anywhere in Yerushalayim, but that's only later on, after the zrike. But if after the shechita, the animal itself was shaking and it found itself outside the azara, even if it was brought back in, it became puzzle. So this also proves this point, and this is against the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that says that by kachim kalam this is not a problem, because anyways you can eat it later outside. Says the Gemara, there's no raya from this brayse. Dilme ba'alye v'yiseres hakaved ushtei kloyes. Maybe when it says that if the animal was outside, it's puzzled, it's referring to the parts of the animal that are burnt on the mizbeach. The tail and the other parts of the animal that are burnt on the mizbeach, it's those parts that actually have the halacha like kachim. You don't eat them anywhere in the Yerushalayim, and therefore if they go out and then you bring it back in, it'll be puzzled. Dr. Gemara regarding this halacha here, Boye Minei Avur de Shmuel Mishmuel. The father of Shmuel asked by his son Shmuel, he bifnim, if the animal is inside the azara, v'ragleo b'chutz, but the feet are sticking out of the azara. Mahu, what's the halacha in such a case? Could you shecht it in this way? So Rashi says, lechatchila. We brought before regarding such a case, b'diyeved, if it was shechted, you cut off the feet from before, you cut off until the bone. But over here the shaila is lechatchila. If the feet are sticking out, could you shecht in such a way? Amalei, so Shmuel answered, Ksiv, the pasuk says, Veheviom Lashem. You have to bring the carbon to the Eibishter. Achetehei kulolefnim. Veheviom means it has to be brought in completely, including its feet. So it's b'chatchila not the right way to shecht when part of the animal is sticking out. Okay, now the father of Shmuel asked his son another few shilas related to this. Talo v'shachat mao. What happens if he's shechting the animal and he hangs it in the air? And that's, he hangs it on something, and the animal, the body of the animal is suspended in the air. And that's how he shechts the animal. Mahu, what's going to be the din in such a case? Amalei, so Shmuel answered, Ksheira, it's kosher. Doesn't make a difference if it's in the air and it's not on the ground, as long as it's inside the azara, so it'll be kosher. Amalei, so his father told him, Ishtabash, you made a mistake with this. Why? Because be'inon shchita al yerech. When the pasuk says by shchita you shechted al yerech on mizbeach tzefayna, what does it mean al yerech? On the side of the mizbeach. Where is the mizbeach? The mizbeach is positioned on the ground. You're shechting the carbon, which is suspended in the air, so then it's not on the ground. It's not considered to be on the side of the mizbeach veleke. So therefore, it will not qualify if you hung the animal and shechted it suspended in the air. Okay, so he learned the new halacha from his father, that in the air it's a problem. He asked him another shaila. Nitla v'shachad, how about the kayin himself? Is hanging and suspended in the air, he's off the ground and he shechts this way. Ma, what would be the halacha in this case? So Shmuel is thinking that, well, if based on the halacha that his father just paskined regarding the animal itself, that if the animal is suspended in the air, it's possible. So he thought here would be the same halacha. So Amalei, Shmuel answers, psula. If the kayin is hanging while he's shechting, it'll also be puzzle. Amalei, so his father tells him, again, ishtabash, you made a mistake. You're comparing to the previous psak din, but it's not the same thing. Why? Shchite al yerech. Regarding the animal itself, it says, v'shachat oisoy al yerech, that the animal has to be shechted on the side of the mizbeach, and when it's on the ground, not suspended in the air, but that's only regarding the animal. But v'loy sheichet, the sheichet himself, the kayin that's shechting, or anyone that's shechting, does not have to be on the ground. He doesn't have to be on the side of the mizbeach. Okay, another halacha he asked him. Nitla v'kibel, how about if the kayin is suspended in the air and he's receiving the blood this way? Mahu, what would be halacha now? So Shmuel's thinking, now he's going to catch on to his father's thinking, and he's going to answer based on what he just passed, and he's going to get it right. So Amalei, Shmuel answers, Ksheira, it'll be kosher. His father just paskin that regarding the kayin that's shechting, or anyone that's shechting, if he's in the air, that doesn't matter. He doesn't have to be in the ground. So the same thing regarding receiving the blood, it'll be kosher. Amalei, his father tells him, Ishtabash, you made a mistake again. Here it's going to be a problem, because ein derech sheiris bakach. This is not how you serve. If you do an aveda in an abnormal manner, it does not qualify. It's different than the shchita. Shchita is not an aveda that must be done through a kain. It's not a sheirus. This must be done through a kain, and it's lamid l'sharis. Has to be a proper way, not by being suspended in the air. Okay, so this will be possible. The final question he asked him, Tolo v'kibel mahu. What if he hangs the animal itself? And that's how he receives its blood. Amalei. So would it be kosher or not? So Shmuel here was thinking that now it's already receiving the blood. So receiving the blood is already the time when you're doing the Avodah. He just explained to him that the kain cannot be suspended in the air. So the same should apply to the animal itself, that if you hang it, it should be possible. So Shmuel answers, Psula. In such a case, it'll be possible. Amalei, his father told him yet again, Ishtabash, you made a mistake. Why? Because Shchite al Yerech, v'loi Kabbalah al Yerech. Only the shchita has to be on the side of the mizbeach, and therefore we said before that if you shecht and the animal is not on the ground, then it doesn't qualify to be on the side of the mizbeach. But v'loi kabbalah yerech. Regarding receiving the blood from the animal does not have to be on the side of the mizbeach. So even if it's suspended in the air, it's fine. That's the halachas, the way the father of Shmuel said it. Okay, so Amar Abaye says about all of this. Abaye argues on one detail. When Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, said this halacha, he didn't make any distinction between kachim kachim and kachim kalim. He said the same halacha by both of them. Now Abaye said, "Bekachim kachim kulam psulais." When it comes to kachim kachim, all of these ways that we spoke about are going to be puzzle, whether the person hangs himself, whether the animal hangs himself, or the animal was hung, that is. Bar minitla v'shachat. The only time by kachim kachim where it's going to be kosher is if the kayin was suspended in the air, or it doesn't have to be only a kayin, whoever it was that was shechting that was suspended in the air, and he shechted. Okay? That means, but if it was the Kabbalah of the dam, and he was suspended in the air and he received the blood this way, again, the Kabbalah of the dam will also be puzzle. Not only if the kain was suspended in the air, but even the animal actually. The chiddush over here, and what Abaye is saying is that when it comes to the Kabbalah of the dam, even if the animal was suspended in the air, it's going to be puzzle when you're receiving the blood, which is not what Shmuel just said. The last point that Shmuel just said is that if the animal is suspended in the air at the time of the Kabbalah, it's not a problem. Only the shechita, the Torah says, al yerech, you have to be on the ground near the mizbeach. Regarding the animal, it doesn't have to be on the side near the mizbeach. But Abaye says, no, even regarding the Kabbalah of the dam, by the kachim kachim, we compare to what it says al yerech, and the Kabbalah has to be on the side of the mizbeach. And the reason is because Abaye held that the ear of the mizbeach the ear of the azara rather, the ear space of the azara is not like inside the azara. So if you lift up the animal, so it's not anymore in the azara. It's not on the side of the mizbeach in the azara, so therefore it's not going to qualify. So that's the detail, again, regarding the Kabbalah of the dam, when the animal is hanging in the air, he argued on Shmuel. This is regarding kachim kachim. Now Abaye goes on and says, B'kachim kalim, when it comes to kachim kalim, kula and ksheirais, all these cases will be kosher, bar min nitla v'kibel. Besides in a case where the kain is hanging in the air and he receives the blood, and the reason is, as Shmuel said, ein derech sheiris bekach, Kabbalah is an Aveda, and if he's doing it while it's in the air, it's not the way to do the Aveda, and therefore that's the only case that will be possible. Okay, but Rav asks on Abaye, and Rav actually goes back and agrees to what the father of Shmuel said. Amar Rav, so Rav asks, now if you hung the animal itself, and it's kachim kalim, so in such a case, Abaye himself is saying that it would be kosher. Why is it kosher? The animal is in the air. It's not 2 feet on the ground. The reason is the avre pnim kipnim dami. So it must be that your opinion is that the ear space of the azara is like the interior of the azara. It doesn't have to be 2 feet on the ground. If so, bekachim kachim nami. So why not say the exact same thing regarding kachim kachim? Avre tzafin kitzafin dami. That when you're on the side of the mizbeach, and the tzafan of the mizbeach, so even when the animal in kachim kachim is lifted up and you're receiving the blood this way, but it's still considered to be like on the tzafan of the mizbeach. It's because the airspace is like the interior of the mizbeach. So why did Abaye argue regarding this case of kachim kachim that when you suspend the animal and you receive the blood, that it will be possible because it's like not in the azara? Why is it not like in the azara? So therefore, Rav says, and he goes back to the opinion that father of Shmuel said before, Bein bekachim kachim, bein bekachim kalim. There's no distinction here. Both by kachim kachim and by kachim kalim, ksheirais, it'll be kosher. Bar, like Shmuel said, beside the father Shmuel said, bar min tolo v'shachad bekachim kachim. If he hung himself and he shechted, he hung the animal, that is. Tala means he hung the animal. He hung the animal and he shechted it by kotche kotchem, then it's going to be possible. Why? Because specifically by kotche kotchem, the Torah says, al yerech has to be on the side of the mizbeach. The mizbeach is on the ground. So if you have to be on the side of the mizbeach, the animal also has to be on the ground. That's the only exception by the kotche kotchem. And nitlo v'kibel, if the kayin is himself suspended in the air and he receives the blood, and that's bein b'kotche kotchem, bein b'kotchem kalim. In both cases, it'll be possible. Why? Because ein derech sheiris bekach. It's not a normal way to do the avodah when you're suspended in the air. This is exactly like the father of Shmuel said it. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks from Rabbi Zayda regarding this halacha that the kayin has to be standing inside when he does the avodah, and we said before that he has to be completely inside. Even Roshei V'Ruba is not good enough. Hu b'fnim, if the kayin's body is basically all inside, but v'tzitzisei b'chutz, there's some strands of his hair that are sticking out. What's the halach in such a case? Mahu, are the hairs significant enough as part of his body and therefore he's partially outside? Or no, his body is inside, the hair doesn't prevent that.
Sounds like a question from Rabbi Yirmiyah.
Yeah, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked these kind of shilas that they took him out of the Bismadrish. Remember that?
Yeah.
Amalei, so Rabbi Zayda answered him, Lav Amre, didn't you say that what's the source that over here? He has to be standing completely inside and his Roshei V'Ruba is not good enough because it says in the Pasuk Ve'vi'um Lashem Achatavi Kula Lifnim. That you bring the carbon and has to be completely brought inside. So Chanami over here as well regarding the kain doing the aveda or shechting. It says B'vayam el oyel mayed, they enter into the oyel mayed, and therefore that means that sheyavai kuloy oyel mayed, he has to be completely inside, and even one hair sticking out will disqualify the aveda. Sagt der Heilige Mishneh Nasnai al gabe akevesh. The blood that was received and is now delivered and brought to the Mizbeach, and instead of spraying it on the right place on the Mizbeach itself, it was placed onto the ramp of the Mizbeach. Or, Shaloi Keneged HaYesod, the blood was sprayed not in the place where you have the foundation of the Mizbeach. The foundation was on the north side of the Mizbeach, on the Ma'ariv of the Mizbeach. 1 second, let me see again over here what Rashi says. On the bottom of the Mizbeach. Alright, that was on the bottom of the Mizbeach. Mizrach is Draimis, that's where you had the Yesod. So you have to pour the blood in the place where there's also the Yesod. But on the Mizrach side of the Mizbeach, Mizrach is finest, I believe it is. There wasn't that extra part of a foundation, an amat high, that was there. So you're supposed to place the blood only where there's a Yesod. The Gemara learns it out later in the Masechta. Or Nasa Nesanitana Lamata Lamaila. The bloods of the karbanis that are supposed to be sprayed below in the lower half of the mizbech. There was a chut sikra in the center of the mizbech. Most of the karbanis, the blood was sprayed below, and he sprayed it instead on the top. Or v'sanitanu l'mayla l'mata, the animals, the karbanis that are supposed to be sprayed above, he sprayed them below. That's only the karban chatas, and a oif of a oila has to be sprayed above, and he sprayed it below. V'sanitanu b'fnim, or from the karban chatas that's supposed to be brought inside. And b'chutz, instead he sprayed it on the outside mizbech, or v'sanitana b'chutz b'fnim. What was supposed to be sprayed on the outside mizbech, he brought on the inside mizbech, pasul. So the carbon is, so there's going to be a psul here, but v'eim boy karis. But there is no karis if you eat from this carbon. Okay, Rashi says, the Gemara will explain what's the story about this karis that the Mishnah has to say here. Okay, but even though the point is, in all these cases, the blood was sprayed in the wrong place, it's pasul, it says, but no kares. So the Gemara, Shmuel said about this Mishnah, when it says here that it's pasul, that means pasul basar. That pasul means that the meat would be pasul to eat from it. That's the only thing that it pasels. However, the owner of the carbon got his atonement by the zrika of this dam, even though it was sprayed in the wrong place. My time, because the Omakra, there's a pasuk that says, that I gave you blood. This is the pasuk where it speaks about the isra of eating blood or drinking blood, and it says why? Because the blood is made. It's for you to place it on the mizbeach to be mechaper. So from this pasuk we learn kivin sheyigia dam lemizbeach. When the blood reached and touched the mizbeach in any location of the mizbeach, niskapru bailam, the owner got his atonement. Even if it's in the wrong place, as far as the kapara is concerned, it's like it was placed on the right place. Okay, there's actually a discussion in Taisvis, long Taisvis here, and Rishonim about this, because the Mishnah here spoke about some very extreme cases. He didn't put it on the Mizbeach itself, he put it just on the ramp of the Mizbeach. There's a discussion whether the ramp has B'chlal the Kedusha of the Mizbeach, or what was supposed to be placed outside was placed inside. So there's a big discussion over here about this, whether in all these cases of the Mishnah, the point that Shmuel says applies. But in the simple Pshat of the Gemara, it's referring to all of the cases of the Mishnah. Okay, so the Gemara asks on this, but if he's saying that the kapara took effect, basanami, so why shouldn't that also qualify now to be able to eat from the meat? After the kapara is done, you can eat from the meat. Answers the Gemara, no, because here, amakra lechape. Here, this pasuk that says that the blood, whichever place in Mizbech it was placed, it will take effect. It specifically says for a kapara. Lekapara nisativ, but v'loy v'ledavar acher. But it only takes effect for the kapara, but not for something else. Now says the Gemara Alma, from here we see Kasava, that what's Shmuel's opinion, Shaloi bim kaimai, kimikaimai dami, when you placed the blood on the Mizbeach, and in its wrong place, that for the kapara it qualifies to be just like it was sprayed in the right place in the Mizbeach. That's the pshat in the Mishnah here. The question is, but Tanan b'idach pirkin, in the next Perek, in the first Mishnah, in the next Perek, it says as follows. Nosne al gabi ala kevesh. Same cases like our Mishnah here. He placed the blood onto the ram, or shalai keneged yisayid, in the portion of the Mizbech whether you don't have that foundation. Or nosne sanitana lamata lamayla v'sanitana lamayla lamata, in the wrong place in the height of the Mizbeach. Or v'sanitana b'fnim b'chutz v'sanitana b'chutz b'fnim, in the wrong place, in the inside or the outside. Im yesh dama nefesh. So here the Mishnah says that if there's still more blood that's left from the animal, which is called dama nefesh, we learned about this before, this is the dam, that the nefesh of the animal comes out after the shchita, not after the behemoth died, but if there's still dama nefesh, then yachser hakosher v'yakabel. Let a kayim, which is kosher, go back and receive the blood and spray it again. So you see over here that the blood that was placed in the Mizbech in the wrong place did not take effect. And that's why it says that the kohen, now that's kosher, should come and do it again. If what Shmuel says, that for the kapara, when you place it not in its place, then it's like in its place for the kapara, why is this Mishnah here saying that the kohen that's kosher has to come and take the blood again? So the Mishnah here says this term, the kohen that's kosher. The Gemara now is thinking that the word hakosher is lav dafke. It just means a kohen. A kohen has to come and spray the blood again. But what's the point of spraying the blood again if, even though it was sprayed in the wrong place, according to Shmuel, for the kapara, it qualifies. But if you'll argue and say, but even Shmuel said that there's something that it does not qualify for, and that is to eat the meat from this carbon. Lahatir basar, so now you're spraying the blood again in order to make the meat permitted to eat. Lahatir basar b'achila, it is, but that can't be, because mi ikez rika delay mechaperes. Is there any such a thing that you're spraying the blood, and the spraying of your blood doesn't accomplish anything? It's not creating any kapara, because the kapara was already done from before. Visharya basar b'achila, and this zrika should have the ability to create a heter for the meat to eat it. Which zrika creates a heter for the meat to be eaten? The zrika that brings kapara. But over here the kapara is done from before already. But because it was in the wrong place, it passes for this extent that you can't eat the meat. To do the zrika again, if it's not accomplishing any kapara now, it's not going to help to be mata this basar. So what's the pshat in that Mishnah there where it says you have to do it over again? Says the Gemara, no, the pshat there in the Mishnah is different. If the first zrika was done by a kohen which is kosher, hochanami, then you would be right, like Shmuel said, even if it was placed in the wrong place, for the kapara it took effect. What is that Mishnah talking about? The Yahweh pasul, that who's the one that sprayed the blood in these places that the Mishnah mentioned? A kohen which is pasul. And that's actually what that Mishnah is talking about over there. In the beginning of that Mishnah, it talks about a kohen which is pasul that did the Aveda. And therefore it says over here that now a kohen kosher comes and does it over again, because when the kohen pasul did it, it didn't take effect. So now the kohen kosher, if there's still blood left, he can take that dama nefesh and do it over again. That's the pshat in that Mishnah. But it's still a problem with what Shmuel said, because if what Shmuel said is true, v'lehevi dochui, even if a pasul kohen sprayed the blood on the Mizbeach, but this should now become rejected, that it cannot be done again. What's the reason for this? Why would it become rejected? Because it's not. We learned in the Mishnah there, it's in the same Mishnah there, that v'kulan shekiblu chutz lizmanai v'chutz l'mekaymai, that all these, meaning this is the ones that are puzzle, if they received the blood and they were thinking that it's going to be sprayed or that they're going to eat the meat out of its time or out of its right place, and that's how they sprayed the blood on the Mizbeach. So, im yesh dama nefesh, yachzer hakosher v'yakabloi. If there's still blood that's left from the nefesh of the animal that you can take and do the zrike, so then yachzer hakosher v'yakabloi, you take the akosher, the kohen should come back and do the kabbalah of the dam again. So the Mishnah says this specifically regarding what? Regarding the receiving of the blood. A kohen which is possible received the blood. Now a kohen which is kosher can come and receive the blood again. Why is it saying this only regarding receiving the blood? Kibloi in. If you receive the blood, a apostle received the blood, then a kohen which is kosher can come and receive it. But zarke loi. But if the kohen that was apostle sprayed the blood, so then a kohen which is kosher cannot come and spray the blood yet again. My time, what's the reason? Lav mishum dahavet dochoi. Because when it comes to spraying the blood, that's the completion of the kapara. And if the completion of the kapara is done in a apostle way by apostle kohen, it gets rejected. It cannot be done over again. So what's the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question is, if what Shmuel said is true, that when the apostle Kohen sprayed it on the Mizbech in the wrong place, it's like he sprayed it in the right place and the kapara takes effect. So once the kapara was done through apostle Kohen, it should become dachui, it should become rejected. If what Shmuel said was not true, and when you shecht it in the wrong place, it's completely puzzle, it's shaloi b'kaimai, and all zrike is worthless. So the fact that it was done by Apostle Kayin should not prevent you of doing it over again, because what did the Apostle Kayin do? Nothing. His zrika on the Mizbech did not accomplish any kapara b'chlal. So therefore you could do it over. That would make sense why the Mishnah says that a Kayin kosher would not come and do it over again. But if Shmuel said that if you do it shaloi b'mkaimai, it makes a kapara like b'mkaimai. So then, if the apostle Kain did the zrike, so then why are we saying that the kosher Kain should not come and do it over again? It should become dochoi. Once the kapara is done through a apostle Kain, the kapara is done in a apostle way, you can't do the kapara over again.
How does a kohen become puzzle?
It says balmum, whatever it may be, a kain that's puzzle. Okay. So the kain that's puzzle, again, the point is only if the puzzle kain does the kapara in the wrong way, the kapara as a puzzle, then the kosher kain can't do it over again. So therefore, this proves the point that Shmuel said that shaloi b'mkaimai makes a kapara like b'mkaimai. Says the Gemara, loy, that's not the pshat over there in that Mishnah. We show the pasal b'machshave. Over there, the reason why the kosher kain is coming and doing it again, over there, the case is that, what's the psul over here? The psul is b'machshave. That he had the wrong machshave, as the Mishnah over there said, that he was doing the zrike, and he had the machshave that it should be done, that it's going to be eaten, shaloi b'mkaimai, or shaloi b'zmanai. That's the kind of psul that we're talking about. Okay, so it's a different, we're talking about the psul b'machshave. We're not talking over here about the fact that it was, the point of here is not to be medayik, that if you zaydik it on the wrong place, and that now it's going to become dochi. The point of here is that it's a psul b'machshava. If that's the case, kabbalah nami. So this should apply to receiving the blood as well. Why are we making a distinction between the spraying of the blood and the receiving of the blood? It says that if you receive the blood, the apostle kind that is, receive the blood with the wrong machshava, then it can be done over again. But by the zrike, because he had a bad machshava, over here it can't be done over again. Why should there be any distinction between the zrike and the kabbalah if the point that we're talking about over here is that the kain, which is puzzle, had a bad machshava in doing the carbon, so it should be the same between the zrike and the kabbalah. What's the difference between them? We're not talking about the point of the kapara that was done. We're talking about a bad machshava here by any of the avedas. That bad machshava is the same whether it's the zrike, whether it's the kabbalah. So why is there a distinction here that we see from the lashon of that Mishnah? Another question over here is mi pasla machshava. If a kain that's pasal does the avodah with a wrong machshava, does that wrong machshava have any effect at all? Rava said the following rule regarding a wrong machshava, a bad machshava in a carbon. A machshava mayeles, when you have a machshava that would passel, it does not take effect. Elo b'mi sheroi la'avoda, has to be a kosher kayin that's fit to do the avoda in order for his machshava to have any effect. U'bedavar haroi la'avoda, and has to be with something that's fit for other karbanis to do an avoda with it. So now she gives an example by a carbon mincha that's usually brought from flour, from wheat. That's a kind of a mincha that is brought by other karbanis mincha, and therefore there the machshava will have an effect, but not if it's from barley, which is mincha sa'aymer, and it's not brought by other karbanis. And only if the avodah was done in a place which is fit for the avodah. Rashi says that means that the mizbeach has to be completely intact, not if there's a pagam in the mizbeach. So if so, how could you say that over here we're talking about the point of machshave, that the Pasal Kayin did the avodah with the wrong machshave, and that's what it's coming to say, that by the zrike you can do you cannot do it over again. By the zrike or by the Kabbalah doesn't make a difference. Either way, the wrong machshave of a kayin which is Pasal has no effect b'chlal. It can't Pasal it at all. This is the rule that Rava said. If the Gemara goes back and says, Loi Teime, going back to the Mishnah that we quoted over there, that it said that if it was Mekabel, if the kayin that's possible was Mekabel the blood, Chutz Lizmane with the Machshava, Chutz Lizmane, Chutz L'Mekaimoi, so then you can do it over again. We were medayik from that what is zrike, you can't do over again because it becomes dochoy, it becomes rejected. Says the Gemara, loy teime zarka. No, don't be medayik that if you once the apostle kayin sprayed it, then once the kapara of the zrika was done by apostle kayin, that rejects it. That's not the diuk. Ella rather say eimeshachtoi loy. What you're supposed to be medayik from here is that if the shchita was done by a pasal kayin with a bad machshava, then you can't do it over again. That's going to pasal a carbon. That's the main diuk that you have to learn out from there. The Kabbalah, only the Kabbalah, but not the shchita. But regarding the zrika, when a pasal kayin does the zrika, it's not going to invalidate it. You could actually do it over again. The only thing you have to be medayik over here is regarding the shchita, when a pasal kain does it, then you can't do it over again. What's the reason for this? The Gemara explains, now my kamashmalon, what is, according to the way you're understanding now that Mishnah, what is it coming to teach us? The pasla machshave, that the machshave of even a pasal kain has the ability to affect the shchita, even though we just said that a pasal kain, his machshave cannot affect any avodah, but by the shchita it will affect it. And why is that? Tanina, we learned this already, that lefichach heim paisla b'machshavim, that because, what's the lefichach? The lefichach is coming in continuation to this, that the Mishnah there says that the shchita can be done by anybody. You don't need a kosher kain for the shchita. Anybody could do the shchita, even a kain that's possible, even a zar. So because even a kain that's possible could do the shchita, so therefore if he has a bad machshav, it's going to passel it, and you can't do it over again. By the other avodah, the Kabbalah over there, only a kain which is kosher could do the avodah. If he's not roy for the avodah, his machshav doesn't passel it. But by the shchita, his machshav will passel the carbon. That's what the halacha is saying here. So the Gemara is asking, but that we already see from what the Mishnah says, that lefichach heim paisel b'machshav. So why does the Mishnah have to say this here? Says the Gemara, hakamash malo, and this is what the Mishnah is coming to say. The mikabala ve'elech loy pasla machshava. That it's not only the Kabbalah itself, that if a kain which is pasel, his machshava will not have any effect because he's not roy for the avodah. But it's not only the Kabbalah, it's the Kabbalah, the Hoilache, the Zrike, any Aveda that's after the Shchita, it will not passel the carbon with his machshava. My time, and what's the reason? Kedarava, like the point that Rava said, that the machshava has to be of someone that's fit for this Aveda. If he's not fit for this Aveda, his bad machshava will not passel the carbon, you could do it over again. And that's what the Mishnah here is coming to say. So the diuk here is not regarding the zrike, adarabah, the zrike, even of pasal machshave, it could be done over again, and with a kain that's pasal that did the kapara, it could be done over again. So there's no question on the point that Shmuel said. So the maskana here remains like what Shmuel said, that when the Mishnah over here said that the zrike was done in a pasal way, in the wrong place, on the mizbeach, on the ramp, or in another place, the zrike actually is kosher for the kapara. It's only possible for the basar, but for the kapara itself, it's still going to be kosher.